Now, very good day to all of you listeners out there. Welcome back to another episode of Simon Says. We are now part 4 of our elections coverage. On show with me is Lyra.
Yep. Hi.
And so, Lyra, today is actually a public holiday and we are still waiting for the new cabinet to be formed, but we do have a new Prime Minister already.
Yes, that is very exciting for Malaysia because after the long wait, we finally have a Prime Minister. But the thing that is in the discussion of every people, I think, is the unity government.
Yeah. So we want to focus today's show more on the unity government, and this is unprecedented in Malaysia. And we just hope to have some discussion that will maybe clarify and shed some light. Now, before we go into that, I want to talk more about Anwar Ibrahim first.
Okay.
Because one of the interesting things about Anwar, really everywhere I go, everywhere I've been reading, I have not heard a single negative thing about him. Now, before you give me your take, do you think the expectation on him is too high?
Well, I think because of some of the people, some of the YBs that have been elected, especially part of Pakatan Harapan, I think that really shaped the people's perspective of Anwar Ibrahim. I think just leading up to election, maybe like a year ago, it wasn't so great, the perspective, I would say, in terms of Anwar Ibrahim. But leading up, especially the last 2 weeks leading up to election, I think the sentiment has been like just great, like almost like ini kali lah. Like I think people are like starting to embrace it because probably they heard enough ringing.
Yeah, just to remind all the listeners and viewers, remember just a year ago, and even at the time when Sabri became Prime Minister, Anwar came out and said, I have the number. So we are like saying this the nth time that he had said that. And of course, a lot of rumor about discord within Pakatan Harapan, DAP and PKR not on good terms and things like that. So a lot of stories, of course, some maybe are just wild rumors. So then, of course, the whole campaign itself has been very, very positive. I do agree with that.
Yep.
And just a very well-run campaign, because after the disappointment of Sarawak elections, Johor, Melaka, where PKR is like didn't get like 1 or 2 seats or not even a seat, and finally they got like almost 30 seats this time. So I think that there has been a turnaround, would you say?
Yeah, it has been positive so far. Especially a turnaround, I think, for Pakatan Harapan.
Regardless of who you want to give credit to, a lot of people say it's Rafizi, it is the voters' effect. But do you agree that Anwar Ibrahim can take credit for leading Pakatan Harapan to where they are today?
Yeah, I would say, just over the last week where there has just been a lot of anxiety just waiting for the formation of the government or even just the appointment of the Prime Minister, I would say that he led the negotiation quite well.
Now, before we go into the unity government, which is the substance of today's discussion, now give me 1 or 2 points why you think Anwar Ibrahim is the right person.
Honestly, well, I think it's just purely based on the skill set of leadership.
Yep.
I think at such a time as this, especially with all the costs of living that is just going up the roof, inflation coming, he has demonstrated that credible records. Formerly as a finance minister, but now also generally, I think the fact that he was able to rally all the different parties within the coalition itself. I'm just talking about Pakatan Harapan. He has demonstrated that sort of leadership.
Yep.
Like what you say, maybe credit to Rafizi or maybe even the leadership of DAP. He has just demonstrated that sort of leadership. So I think that is really a good quality. We don't want another weak leader. No one is willing to follow a weak leader. So that, first point definitely is crediting to the leadership. But secondly, I think it's the investor perception of him.
The reaction after his appointment.
Yeah, and also just the business community in general. Over the last 2 years, probably people have suffered enough and the economy has not been great. People thought that maybe 2021 is going to be greater, but it's just like, oops, down the drain. So just based on that, just based on the strengthening of Ringgit Malaysia, of course, that's one of the thing that has been campaigned by PKR, especially. Yep. I just think generally based on that and based on the records in the share market, like in 15 months, it hit record high. So all this thing, I think it's a good sign.
Yep.
I mean, of course, there are a lot of things yet to be tested.
Yeah, I just came back from a business trip in Johor this morning, and the general sentiment is really cautiously optimistic that he could be the right person, but the hard work is in the front.
Yeah, I mean, this just reminds me of Bojo. I mean, Boris Johnson, everyone has a great expectation of him. I mean, him being the proponent, I mean, the advocate of the Brexit and everything. I think a lot of people are very optimistic. But after that, I mean,
But turned out to be a big disappointment.
well, I mean, I guess everyone has that potential, and he so far has demonstrated a great amount of credibility in terms of that respect. So, like what you say, cautiously optimistic. I think that is a good way to put it to see. I mean, anyhow, we could, I mean, always go for another election.
Well, I hope not. And I think people are not really in the appetite for another election. But one of the skill set you mentioned, of course, able to bring people together, and this leads us to our next big topic, which is unity government. I mean, of course, you can call it unity government, or maybe it's more like a minority government. But of course, now with all the components suddenly all come in, and I mean, I'm glad that Perikatan Nasional decided not to be part. Otherwise, it's like so weird, right? Everyone is in the government.
Yeah, I mean, I was just reading up about Belgium, like where 7 parties are coming together. Then
After 500 days.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of gets you to think.
It's like a committee like that. It's like during our school time, you have committee of 6 or 7. You have your Leo club or whatever club. And it's like you can't run a government like this.
And it felt like people just sort of cast a lot to, okay, that's the new prime minister that we have. I mean, especially in Belgium, I think.
Yeah, I think one of the party leader jokingly say we just cast a lot.
Yeah.
And maybe they did, in the end, because nobody has a clear mandate. So in a way, we are a bit like that. Nobody has a very clear mandate. If one of the coalitions have 100 seats, for example, then I think the Agong would have been like, okay, you just go and form government. I don't care how you do it.
Yep.
But this time, so some people kind of criticize Agong's intervention. It's like, so many interviews, so many meetings. But I felt like his hands are tied because it's like 80 plus, 70 plus. Nobody has a super clear mandate. So I felt like what he did was pretty fair. And the result so far is good. So I want to talk about unity government, but one of the points, talking about how Anwar has the ability to bring people together, even the opposition. And you look at all the prime minister candidate, look at Muhyiddin right after, he kind of signed disagree on the unity government proposal. And he was just like kind of unleashing and, manifesting his unhappiness. But whereas Anwar has been ultra cool and just like, I'm just watching a movie, I'm just eating the popcorn,
Yeah.
whatever comes, come. I just felt like there is that kind of serenity about him that is needed because his task ahead is going to be very, very difficult.
I guess some people are just called to be that crisis leader. So I think he could be one of those.
He does have that kind of temperament, at least from what we can see so far. And that's why I go back to the first question. Is the expectation too high?
Maybe.
Yeah. But let's talk about the unity government now, because that's one of the things that we have been asked so much, right? And I think a lot of people's mind exploded.
Yeah, I mean, I was just reading about one article that says Muhyiddin wasn't too happy about the whole concept of unity government because of one of the things that concerns the whole topic, which is the rotation of prime minister position, which is interesting. I mean, of course, we have seen it somewhat over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Still, the concept is still very, very foreign to a lot of people. And what do you think about the rotation?
Yeah, I mean, rotation, of course, we have that in Sabah. We're just talking about that previously. So after the 1992 implosion, UMNO came into Sabah and then, so nobody really have dominant power for the next 15, 20 years. So they kind of have a rotation. I can't remember it's 1 year or 2 years. But you keep changing and nobody really has the control. In a way, it's good. But of course, in Sabah, what happened? Eventually, UMNO took power. And they became dominant. So, yeah, every time you change prime minister, it's a big deal, everything changed. And even when Sabri went out for less than 2 years, he has his new slogan, right? You know, Keluarga Malaysia.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go to Putrajaya, you can see the huge banner everywhere. So the Prime Minister in our system really has tremendous power to reset. So based on that, I would say it's not prudent. It is maybe not wise to do that. And Muhyiddin's concern, I do share, because it is like, now of course, even the last GE, Mahathir was supposed to be there for a year and a half or 2 years.
Yeah.
So, but everyone kind of accepted that because that was the election, not manifesto, but sort of promise.
Yeah, which unfortunately fell.
And so, I don't know, I'm not a big fan of rotation because you do need someone in charge.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why we were talking about the history of Malaysia, right? So in the past, when a chief minister, a Menteri Besar or prime minister did not command the majority, based on Westminster tradition, he or she could just dissolve the house.
Yep.
That's based on Stephen Kalong Ningkang case, which went all the way to Privy Council. But then it all changed in the Perak crisis.
Yeah, which is because of which is unfortunate. I mean, given that there is a lot of precedent sort of history, and then you just suddenly see the collapse because...
Yeah, of course, he was the Sultan, and everyone say he should have known better. But then, do you realize it's not his fault? Because they went to the court, and the federal court actually said, you can just change the Menteri Besar without. So Niza was not able to dissolve the house.
Yeah.
So when you look at it, it's not really Sultan Azlan Shah's fault, it was the federal court. So we do have, of course, I don't know the detail whether Perak's constitution is different from Malaysia's constitution, but it's just kind of move away from the Westminster system. And that's why now we have all these things. Remember when GE14, the Argonne was interviewing people, then Sheraton, then Sabri. So we're kind of in that era already. I guess that's where we are.
It's interesting that you mentioned about all this thing. I mean, like even the cases going all the way up to the federal court. Would you think that unity government, the formation of unity government, would somewhat cause a compromise in a lot of reforms that were actually stated in Pakatan Harapan's manifesto?
I guess that's the first reactions from Pakatan supporter, because they were like, oh, now we have to be in bed with UMNO. Bad news. But anyway, it's still better than PAS. I think that's the general reaction I get. But on the flip side, I think there are certain advantages also, because we talk about the difficult pill. Let's say we're going to bring back GST. Let's say we're going to reduce subsidy. And I think unity government is just going to make it more palatable, because all the parties, it will be in their best interest. So now it will be Pakatan Harapan, it will be Barisan Nasional, it will be GPS, it will be Warisan. They all need to explain to their base, why are we reducing the subsidy?
True.
So that's the good. I'm trying to look at the positive. And even some of the reform, to say that Barisan Nasional doesn't want reform, I know in the manifesto episode we kind of laugh at them. But Sabri allowed Undi 18, allowed anti-hopping law. So, people change.
Yeah.
So, and since we're at this, let's talk about the future of Malay votes, because what's very interesting about this election is, the Malay will always have the biggest vote share, regardless of what happened, regardless of who are in charge. But all of a sudden, they all shifted to PAS. UMNO's vote shifted to PAS. Now, some people say it's because of Zahid, because of the perception of corruption, etc., etc. And some people even have buyer's remorse when they know that PAS maybe could be federal government. So what do you think? It's like, remember in the past, we talked about ABU, anything but UMNO.
Yeah. And
even Haris Ibrahim came out and say, I have shifted from ABU to ABP. Anything but PAS. So why do you think there is that shift so quickly?
I think because as much as PAS trying to look like they are moderate, I think the record has shown that they are not quite inclusive as they claim to be.
Yep.
I guess Malay voters, they are more communal, would you think? And they are more just like we are a pack. So hence we should vote for like a similar group of people. And maybe it's the cultural Islam that they are embracing,
Yep.
especially at the northern part of Malaysia. So, but just looking at the record, I mean, one, if you look at the development, it's not quite there. I mean, the infrastructure in those few states are unfortunately quite sad to see. I mean, you talk about some of these which have a lot of resources, kind of like Sarawak as well.
Yep.
I mean, the native Sarawakians just keep on voting back the GPS.
Like talking about the eastern and northern states, especially the eastern states, because they have been under opposition in the past, has been deemed opposition for a long time compared with Barisan Nasional. Do you think it's really because they're in opposition, then the federal power, which was Barisan Nasional for the longest time, just decided, I'm not going to give you money for development?
Yeah, I believe a great measure has to do with that as well. I mean, look at how, Najib has just been like making sure that he gains the most profit out of this whole thing. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to know that funds have been withheld to all these East Coast areas.
Yeah, YMDB funds started from supposedly royalty payment, but suddenly Terengganu became opposition, so the money was not paid.
Yep.
So it's like, that's why, of course, we talk about royalty, we talk about states' right. There's a lot of focus on Sabah and Sarawak, but many do not realize that even the other states here are also suffering. But very interesting you mentioned Sarawak because it's the same thing. Sabah and Sarawak have been kind of good friends with Barisan Nasional, and they are also not receiving all the money. And the federal government will be like, just say, okay, Sabah, Sarawak, GPS, GRS, whatever, you can have full control over your state, but we're still not going to give you the royalty. So I guess, very ironically, that Sarawak finally got more right after the weakening of Barisan Nasional in West Malaysia in the last GE. And all of a sudden, GPS started to have a bit of voice, I guess. But that's why I remember one episode we were just saying that Pakatan sort of missed the boat. They should have just offered them a very good deal so that GPS will always be on their corner.
Yep.
But they failed that, and some of the things that Lim Guan Eng said, which a few days ago he was required to give an apology. We were just talking about that even this morning among the businessmen, and surprisingly, all the Chinese businessmen, they really felt like Lim Guan Eng was in the wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I get that a lot. I mean, especially among the Chinese communities. What's interesting is I also saw a tweet from a Malay that says, like, if all it takes is just one apology, why not do it earlier?
It's not it's not a very expensive price to pay. And so it's interesting that with the weakening of the original coalition, Barisan Nasional has been in power for so long. Do you think this is the beginning of the decentralization of power?
Yeah, but I do believe so. I mean, just not just focusing purely on MA63, whereby you have the West Malaysia and Sabah Sarawak as equal partners. I think it's also a good thing, especially for the underdeveloped states. I mean, you talk about, like just now we talk about Terengganu. So I think it could be actually a very good way of really making sure that all these areas, the people are being given a preference as well.
So it's interesting you mentioned this because I think one of the few episodes ago we mentioned this, that in the last GE after Pakatan won, then there was a law forum, very huge one. I remember Liu Qingdong was there, a few people were there, and there was this professor from NUS Singapore. He came, and he is an expert in constitution law, and he talked about decentralization. And he said, yes, I know Sabah and Sarawak, you wanted it, but actually every state wanted it. So I want to just put to you, because, we are from Sarawak, we know the sentiment. And we already said in the last episode, Malaya has nothing to do with us. We just said that shouldn't be the mindset. But now, if we take one step further, it's like, if we want to focus on decentralization, less federal power, and all the states having a bit more power, maybe that will lead to Sabah and Sarawak having autonomy and greater self-determination.
Yep.
Because I just felt like they are like skipping some steps. Because they kept saying, look, Peninsular Malaysia, nothing to do with us, but you have been together for 60 years. You can't just... Now, I know many many respectable leaders in Sarawak would disagree, but I just felt like after looking at all these things, we come to unity government. We need a few steps to decouple everyone
Yep.
from federal power.
Yeah, I think it will be a really, really great thing moving forward as well. I mean, it could be something not just for the Sabah Sarawakians to think. I
Yeah.
mean, it's also something for all the state. I mean, generally all the voters are the stakeholders here.
Yeah.
So it could be something that they could really begin to think, what is it in it for our state?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, definitely each state, everyone is somewhat loyal to the state,
Yeah.
somewhat patriotic to the state. So if we talk about all this thing, and I guess like in a way it's nationalism, but in the state level. So hence they could really just making sure that all these states are also being given that preference to be developed properly as well. I guess one reason why all these voters keep on voting back the same base is also because of the systemic poverty that
Yeah,
they see in the
correct.
state. So I think one good thing about decentralization could be maybe a decoupling of systemic poverty.
Yeah, and also I just want to say to my friends in Sabah and Sarawak, a lot of them are very concerned. Let's say we focus on other states, our wealth is taken away. No, that's just such a wrong mindset, because when you have self-determination, the natural resources are yours.
Yep.
And it's not going to run out anytime soon. So I think it's just I don't know how to put it. It's like we're fighting over the technicality and the process, and so but I guess that's the discussion that we need to have. And I really believe that now, coming back again to unity government, because that's really the thrust of today's show, and we're going to end with that, is, do you see unity government being an expression of decentralization?
I do believe in a lot of ways, yes. I mean, because you have to do a lot of negotiation to make sure that laws are passed by all the YBs.
I heard something very interesting, because this is from Sarawak point of view again, and they're like, we want royalty and things like that, and say, PMO can just make a decree and give us additional royalty. It's not so simple. You have so many stakeholders, so it's going to take a lot of effort.
Isn't it kind of like the executive order that the president of United States could sign, but then still you have to go through the Senate, the House to pass the law?
It's like, because of course historically our PMO has become so powerful, it reaches its zenith during Najib's time. That's why all the abuse can happen, and I think that will be one of the big tests for Anwar, is how will he continue to decentralize PMO even more. So I was just reading this morning, he said, there was a new car order, I'm not going to use it, I'm not going to renovate the office. So it's a good start, because that's his election pledge. Everyone is concerned about bread and butter, but there needs to be meaningful decentralization. And I think for GPS to be kind of stable, for lack of a better word, stable partner, I think the federal will need to offer something better.
But isn't it kind of similar to the popular opinion of Tun Mahathir previously? Because he seems to be quite a humble sort of person. When he was the prime minister again.
Yeah, at that time, I think we were all fooled by him. Now, do you remember what he was doing? And he was there every day. There was press conference, right? And he just said, we're trying to do this, we're trying to do that. And this still stick to my mind. And he was like, everything I need to go back to Pakatan Harapan's council. It's like I need a mandate. But then later on, when the first cabinet list came out, when all the things came out, he started to undermine the government. I don't know intentionally or not, I don't want to overanalyze. But I just felt like he just turned 180 degree and no longer consult. And then the whole thing just lead to Sheraton. And I really don't see that happening with Anwar. Firstly, because his bargaining power is even lesser this time.
Yep.
He needs to be even more careful not to piss off his partners and friends, because some are just friends, they're not true partners,
Yeah.
Yeah, but okay, I think, it's almost 25 minutes. But let's kind of move into the part, because we started off by saying that a lot of people's mind exploded because Why do you think, I already mentioned one is that suddenly you have to work with BN and suddenly you have to work with UMNO. But then I get a lot of feedback from people, UMNO is better than PAS, those kind of thing. But maybe you can give us your additional take, why you think people's mind exploded.
I guess one of the main theme of especially PKR is that we are taking down the Pelamun, the robbers, literally. And then
I see
now,
their slogan, is it?
yeah. And I mean, of course, the theme song as well.
Is there a theme song?
Yeah, there is a song. I mean, yes, they do.
So who is a Pelanun? But is already in jail, right, Najib?
Yeah, but I think because I mean we also saw the tweet by Kyrie, right, that says 1 vote for him is 1 vote for Zahid. Hence, he was sort of like being sidelined. So, but in a way, I guess people's mind exploded because you're talking about taking down robbers. You're talking about institutional reform, and suddenly you are in that
in bed with them.
Yeah, I wouldn't say they are totally in bed. I mean,
it's the circumstances force them to be like this.
Yeah, which is unfortunate because if you look at the progression of the whole events, GPS unfortunately didn't choose well. I mean, the day after election, they just sort of say, well, we're going to support PN.
Now, let me be the devil's advocate here, okay? And, I think what will happen if Pakatan and GPS, GRS, and Warisan team out, then you're going to create a backlash of a mono Malay Islamic group, UMNO and PAS.
Yeah.
So, I don't know which is worse. I just felt like with this, we have dodged the theocracy kind of bullet for a while. And yeah, I mean, you can imagine, right? If you kind of push them to the corner, then they will rally and it's just going to be very, very much racial and religious.
Yeah, I mean, but I think it's really a good thing that Pakatan Harapan is working with them because, like, one, like what the reason that you have mentioned, and secondly is also because, like, you are somewhat keeping your enemy closer to you, in a way. I mean, but also because I guess the main objective has been attained, which is the weakening of Barisan Nasional, literally. So then it really creates a more healthy sort of government where you don't really have a more dominant party. So I think that decentralization itself is really, really great, a very great outcome from this whole thing. And also the fact that they are able to just work closely, that shows the breaking down in a way of the racial barrier that we have always been talking about. So even with the circulation of like 13 May tragedy, people are no longer so having such a huge stigma over this whole incident. So I think that itself, I would say, I would very much prefer PH and UMNO together rather than PAS.
Okay, good. Okay, so let's end with one or two final take on the election. Now, it could be something that has happened, it could be something that is happening, or something to watch out for in the future. Just one or two things from your side.
One of the things that I was thinking of is, could there be an appointment of senators? I mean, that personally,
for sure.
I personally, I'm against it because I think it's like that would really cause me to think, why do we need to vote? Because then suddenly you see one person bypassing, like Jeremy Corbyn in the UK. So that I think it's really like like a big no for me. So I think that I really hope that there is no appointment of senators here.
But it's likely to happen though.
Hopefully not, because you're talking about a much lesser cabinet members. But then if you're adding in more of these senators.
But what if you have senator, you appoint, now usually some of the party, they will put in senator because these are important members. Maybe they lost in the election, but they remained important. So for example, PKR, I'm just thinking about Saifuddin. Saifuddin lost in Kulim, very likely will be appointed a senator, I feel. But what if you put all these people in minister, but overall the number is still reduced, like what Anwar promised? Would that be satisfactory to you?
Honestly, I'm not so sure because you can't get the best of everything. It could also mean the other party.
Have you heard the rumor that maybe KJ will be appointed?
I saw that. I was like, okay.
Now the rumor is rooted in the fact that Anwar owes KJ during Badawi's time. Now this is a rumor, like I say. when he got out from jail the first time, it was Badawi's watch. And some speculated that it was KJ who brokered the whole deal.
Interesting.
So do you see what Anwar was saying the other day? He said, I'm not going to appoint people as a way of returning favor.
Yeah.
So I think he's thinking about it. People are thinking about that. So,
It's interesting. I mean, it's kind of like in a company, do you want to appoint certain non-executive directors?
Yeah, we are at... I think it's inevitable. It's just whether it's going to be acceptable or not.
Maybe, I guess, why can't they be an important advisor, but they don't hold any important role?
Possibly, but of course the level of power is really in the ministry, the budget.
Yeah, but of course, then going back to the people's choice. I mean, isn't this whole election, I mean, the government should be a government by the people, for the people.
Yeah, so the MP decide what government is formed, but in terms of the cabinet, I think the Prime Minister has the final say based on our constitution. I'm not so bothered about that, but I can understand where you come from. I think we will see a few.
Yeah, I guess, but I guess that is a bit of a turn off for me.
Okay, fair
Otherwise, unity government, I'm totally cool with it.
Okay, let me think. I was thinking about something, but suddenly just kind of escaped my mind because we went to the KJ, all those kind of things. Just thinking. But any other take you have regarding the election?
No, I guess it will be interesting once we get the SPR results, just to really see if really the shift in the voting is really attributed from the Undi 18 voters, or actually it's because of something else, maybe something more deeper in terms of like the whole education system, maybe a whole generation that has been brainwashed.
Yeah. And for me, I'm looking forward to the cabinet list because I think that will really show what kind of deal has been brokered, and it's not a bad thing. I think people need to understand we're in unprecedented time. We're in times that Malaysia has never been before. So don't need to get too worked out because we are still a democracy in process.
Yep.
And people complain about the Argon, people complain about Prime Minister, people complain about Zahid playing a role. But it's like, hey, you voted for this kind of formation. It's like, if you allow one coalition to get 100 plus, then we won't have this issue.
Yep.
So I'm interested to see the cabinet list soon. And I think that will reveal a lot of things about Anwar Ibrahim's administration.
Yeah, looking forward to that.
Okay, so I think our time is up. So I don't know, we're going to have part 5 again, but it seems like people are kind of interested in election.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about like a lot of voters' awareness.
Yeah, we want to continue this voters' awareness for the next cycle, not just 2 or 3 weeks or the 4 days after election and no prime minister. Kind of people just, their eyes and attention are glued there, not even watching World Cup and things like that. So it's good. It's good. I think it's good that people care, and it shows that they have not given up on this nation.
Yep.
That's a very encouraging point. So really, I do feel there's a surge of positivity among the people.
The pursuit of happiness.
Yeah. And so a bit more realistic this time, not like 2018 La La Land.
Yeah.
Welcome to Malaysia Baru, that kind of thing. No more that kind. Because they know that it's fragile, but it's worth fighting for.
Yep.
All right, so that's it for now, and join us back for another episode.
Yep.
Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.